during the Six Nations. They showed the dressing rooms of the Irish team, and there was bananas, Barry's tea, and Flavin's flapjacks on the table.
Wow, you can't buy that kind of...
You can't buy that kind of press.
So I think it's fair to say that porridge is having a moment, and so too is the family business that has been making it for almost 250 years. Flahavans is one of Ireland's oldest and best loved food brands. And on this episode of Food Matters, I'm delighted to be joined by Johnny Flahavan, who with his siblings is the next generation leading this iconic brand into the future. Welcome back to Food Matters. I'm Mick Kelly, the founder of GIY, and across this series I'm meeting the people who are reconnecting us with real, healthy, sustainable food. They tell us why food matters to them and why it should matter to you too. Now, Johnny Flahavan was born into one of the most iconic family businesses in Ireland, and after spending a number of years working in finance in London, he's recently returned home to Kilmacthomas in County Waterford to play a central role in the future of Flahavans. Johnny is now the 7th generation of his family to run the business, and in this episode he talks about what it's been like to move home and live right next door to the mill, his plans for growing the brand and the product range, why porridge has suddenly become so sexy, and a whole lot more besides.
It isn't a foregone conclusion that any one of the family members would have been adopted into the business. It was very much, you've got to go away and prove yourself before you'll be welcomed back in again. I moved to the UK and early morning starts going into the office, and you'd be hungry by 11, or you'd be snacking, you'd be taking cups of coffee to get your sugar levels up and get your caffeine levels up. And I just rediscovered in my early 20s again how beneficial porridge can be for your day. Oats have a shell on them, and that can be used for animal feed, and it's got a nutritional value to it, but you're not going to want to see it in your porridge, so we remove it. And one of the streams we use it for is we use it as a fuel source for the mill. I've got a 2-year-old at home. We live immediately adjacent to the factory, so his life is looking out the window at the factory, and he's fascinated by the tractors that come at harvest time and fascinated by the machines, and just wants to be part of it at this stage.
Taking over the running of a family business that has been thriving for centuries is of course a privilege, but it's not without its pressures. I was curious to know how Johnny feels about taking on this new role with all of the history and responsibility that comes with that.
I guess to talk of the history, being part of that 7th generation, it's 250 almost years there in that same site. It does come with some amount of pressure on it. I guess, it's a great business in that we've got kind of quite a strong family support around it. John Flahavan, my father, is still very much part and parcel of the business and still playing a role day to day.
Okay.
And then I've similarly got a brother and sister working in kind of the team with me. So there's a good family kind of foundation there that stayed with the business. Yeah. Like I say, coming into a business that's got that longevity and it is such an iconic Irish brand, it does come with a pressure to try and maintain it. Yeah. Beyond being, successor to John Flahavan, but beyond that, it's a custodian for the business. But equally, we're looking to try and make your mark on it and grow it and enhance its potential and kind of have it ready to hand on to the next generation again. That's inherent in how my thinking is around taking on that business piece.
It's almost like being lord of a manor and inheriting this 1,000-acre property with a big mansion on it or something. Like you've got, it feels like that sort of pass it on to the next generation better than you found it kind of thing. That it's something similar, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, inevitably it's probably not quite that same analogy, but certainly that there's an amount of responsibility in maintaining it and having it for the next generation. My father took it from his father and uncle, and similarly, his opportunity was to try and build the brand and establish it. And more recently, John has been going through his own archives of the history of the business, the history of the site, and seeing kind of how it's progressed over the last number of years. He pulled out only yesterday a document that was market research from 1919, talking about Flavin's participation in the cereals market from, in a Dublin housewife survey. Flahavans were less than 10% of, recognition within that cohort. So it's just kind of, there has been that piece of that would have been in a period of time where it was my great-grandfather's handing down to my grandfather and my granduncle, and that sort of legacy and maintaining the business and growing the business has always been part of that legacy and heritage.
Still, that does like that suggests you had 10% market share in 1919, which is incredible as well. Like, so that like would that have been the product being very similar to what people recognize as a bag of Flavin's oats now, or?
Absolutely not. So I guess going back to that era, it wasn't the same product. Porridge wasn't what we would commonly refer to as porridge now.
So what would it have been?
It would be more to, I guess, we retail a product called Pinhead. Yeah. So the unflaked oats, that would have been what you most commonly would have seen as part of your exercise in buying your porridge day to day.
Okay.
Your housewife would have cooked porridge on an overnight basis, and she would have had, a number of hours to cook that, as opposed to today's experience of 90 seconds in the microwave.
Wow. And what does that mean if you think about oats growing in a field? Like, what's the difference between a pinhead oats and the progress oatlets that you buy for your porridge now?
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of the mechanical kind of manufacturing process. To talk about just the functional differences of it, Pinhead is just the pre-flaked oat. That's effectively what it is. So the cooking process that we apply, it's, we make no additions to the product. We take no subtractions. It's simply just a process of mechanical forming. It's pressure, it's heat, and that's what creates the oat flake that we have.
Okay. So talk to me about, was your father big on the idea of you kind of going off and doing your own thing in your 20s and 30s, say, before you came back to the business? Because I know you did that, didn't you? You went to work. Yeah. What kind of things did you get up to?
So, yeah, I mean, all of us, and there's 6 children in the family, 3 of which are now working in the business. And all of us have been encouraged to take our own paths in life, to follow what we wanted to try and achieve. My own personal journey was, I qualified as an engineer from college and went straight from there. I worked in financial services, went to the UK and worked in a couple of big banks over there. I spent nearly 15 years in that industry, kind of went through the ranks, etc., and enjoyed my time there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, when an opportunity arose back at the business that suited my skill set and suitable for my own circumstance, then my family decided that it would be an opportunity for me to come back and join the business at that point.
Okay.
But it isn't a foregone conclusion that any one of the family members would have been adopted into the business. It was very much, you've got to go away and prove yourself before you'll be welcomed back in again.
Yeah.
And you'd only be into a position that is available as opposed to one being created and modified for you. It's, it's a business at the end of the day that we want to run efficiently and effectively.
Yeah.
And that was always kind of the mantra that we would have been given.
Yeah. And like, I think as teenagers, certainly in my situation anyway, you kind of rebel against, what what the family do. And like, I'm sure you spent teenage years working in the business and summer jobs and things like that. Was there any part of you that was like, I'm never going to work there here, I want to go off and do my own thing?
There was certainly, it was never an instance that I didn't want to work there, as it was always an enjoyable place to work, even through teenage years. And, I did see that it was a really cornerstone of the community and did really good work. It was a nice place to work. But at the same time, I did enjoy the fact that I was allowed that freedom to take leave and travel to the UK and have my own life there. And at the same time, when opportunity arose to return, that was available to me.
Yeah. So let's sort of talk then about the innovation, I suppose, that we see more recently, because when I was growing up, porridge was like, that's what you had for breakfast, and I suppose like so many Irish families, and I remember the kind of iconic ads in the 80s and things like that. But more recently, it just strikes me that there's a complete kind of refresh of the brand, where we're seeing, and a lot of the products that would be on the shelves at home and in our cupboards at home in the kitchen, like the high-8 muesli and the flapjacks and things like that. That kind of innovation that's happened has been incredible to watch. Like, is that something that your father brought in and led on with, and what's the next steps of that?
Yeah, no, absolutely was. So I guess, talking back to the history, and we're able to recall it, like, going back to the mid-90s, we had 3 retail items, 3 SKUs. It was porridge in 0.5 kilo, 1 kilo, and 1.5 kilo. That was it. Yeah. That was our range.
Yeah.
If I look at what's against the portfolio today, when you include our export market and all of the different components that we have, we've got upwards of 60 SKUs. So that in and of itself is telling the story of how we've developed the business and the brand. I guess to your point, John Flahavan would have been, very much at the pioneer of that and trying to develop out what we could do with the brand, going back to, the mid 2000s. He was looking at the organic side of things. He was looking at kind of the mueslis and granolas, and I guess what he wanted to do is use our porridge as kind of that is our bread and butter. That's where we have our expertise. He just wanted to expand that and broaden the range. What we do like to what we do recognize with ourselves is that we see ourselves as the experts in oats, and so anything oat adjacent or in that category, we like to be a part of, because we can apply our own expertise to that. Be it in the mueslis, be it in the granolas, be it in the oaty flapjacks, or even the oat drink. They're all recent renovations that have just kind of extended ourselves into an over that whole oat environment.
Yeah. And we might come back to the oat milk, because I'm fascinated by that side of it particularly. But I guess, again, what strikes me about this business is that, at a time when ultra processed foods are sort of, prevalent in the market, and we've got a product here under our noses as Irish consumers that's like, the oats are grown here and then minimally processed into a healthy product. Can you talk a little bit about the oat growing and what's the scale of that? Because I know a big part of the boast of the brand, I guess, is that all of the oats, I think, are grown. I can't remember the figure, within certain radius of the plant in Kilmacthomas and so on. Can you speak a little bit about that? Like, how many growers? What's the sort of scale of the
sure.
production?
I can call a couple of figures on this. So, our total tonnage intake is in the order of 20 to 25,000 tons per year.
Okay.
So that's kind of what we intake. And we break that down across an organic and conventional growers. So to talk of the conventional, that's kind of your conventional growers are the ones that will be employing traditional farming practices that would have been evident here for the last decades. And for those, they are the ones that are very local to the company. So they would have been growers that would have been supplying to us for, in instances of 4 generations plus. They've been partnered to the factory in supplying grain into us.
Yeah.
So we have about maybe 60 to 65 conventional growers that would supply to us. And again, they're all local. They're coming from Waterford, they're coming from Cork, Tipperary, some are stretching into Kenny, but broadly that's kind of the catchment that we have for that. And then on the organic side, kind of a big part of our business now is the organics. And on that side, it's taken from the whole of the island. The organic sector is by a function, it is a much smaller part of overall agriculture in Ireland. So we've broadened kind of our reach to capture as many growers in the organic space as we can.
Yeah.
And we have about 160 more coming on this year, so maybe it's touching 170. And they'll supply to us from all across the island.
Yeah. And what sort of scale or percentage of the total porridge, of your total porridge sales would be organic at the moment,
It's probably in the region of 35% would be organic.
So it's significant.
Yeah, sizable, yeah.
And because interestingly, actually, we had Paul Brophy on the podcast who grows broccoli, and he talked about the sort of a similar, the same kind of question to him, how much of the organic or the broccoli crop is organic, and it's much, much smaller. So that's a very significant thing that it's at that kind of scale.
Well, I mean, if you look at Irish agriculture as an overall, it's less than 5% is organic at this point.
Yeah.
That would be in total. It's not taken full root at this stage.
What does the research tell you about why such a significant volume of your consumers will go organic with porridge? Like, do you know, like why is it more in your case than it would be with vegetables, say?
It's hard to pinpoint exactly. Much of our organic is export. So for ourselves and our own positioning, it's a brand that's recognized in the UK, for example, as a leading organic brand.
Okay.
As opposed to a leading porridge brand. So it's actually it's in the organic sphere as opposed to in the oat sphere. And so that's a driver for that side of the business for us. But I guess beyond that, I mean, the price point from a consumer's perspective for conventional versus organic oats isn't that very significant.
Yeah.
And that is probably a factor that would say why people would be more inclined to trial it or maintain it as part of their buying.
Yeah. And is UK and Ireland but there is Flavins available in the US as well, I think, is there?
Yeah. So we have export to about kind of 20 countries
Wow.
in total. So Ireland is the flagship. Ireland, the domestic market is so important to us. And after that, the UK, again, on the organic side particularly, is a really important part for us. And then as you go kind of further into the next kind of biggest markets for us, South Korea would be our third biggest export market.
That's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, very.
How did
people
that
are often
happen?
surprised by that, yeah.
How did that happen, and why? Like, why do you think it's playing well there?
Look, we have a really great business partner in South Korea.
Okay.
And look, we've been able to find a niche for ourselves in that space as an imported kind of premium, coming from kind of an environmental side of things, from a South Korean perspective, without putting too much in their frame of mind. Their understanding of Ireland is a green country. It's fresh air. It's lovely rain. It's all of that nice stuff around crops and growing and all that kind of thing. So for that consumer, they look to Ireland as being kind of a premium location for this type of product to be grown.
Yeah.
And we found kind of being able to carve out kind of particular products that suit that market. And they seem to be kind of taking a little bit of a foothold in it. Yeah,
that's amazing. And I'm just you mentioned the number of growers that you have. Like, is there a particular benefit or a particular advantage that this area has? So like you mentioned, Waterford and Tip and Kilkenny and so on, in terms of kind of land and climate or soil and climate that helps us?
Absolutely. No, I think certainly the southeast of Ireland and Ireland as a whole would have a very advantageous climate to growing oats.
Okay.
And historically would have been. It's always been kind of that temperate climate. It's always had reasonable summers, reasonable springs, little frost, and all of those things create an advantage to growing kind of a really quality oat. So we would have always understood that, the oats from Ireland and particularly from the southeast of Ireland have a better performance from a grower and from a miller. Yeah. And for the consumer again as well, that you get the best of it.
And presumably then oats, like every other plant, you're subject to the vagaries of the weather and all of that. So like how much does that kind of influence your like the oats that are available to you? And I suppose linked to that is climate change kind of problematic, causing problems in terms of production?
I think, yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt, climate change has been an impact to our business and to our growers. Look, we've very good relationships with our growers and we have always tried to work with them as much as possible. But, anyone who has been in the tillage sector, and look, anyone in agriculture, be it in dairy or be it in beef or whatever factor you're looking at it, everyone's had an effect over the last number of years. A very wet winter, wetter summer, those sort of things have a really, really material impact on how anyone in the farming industry can operate.
Yeah.
And that has an impact knock on to ourselves in terms of trying to get the right capture of grain that we require for our milling process.
And the right quality.
And the right quality as well.
Yeah.
So, things that we can do and we can influence, or we can try to support the growers where we can. And then also, try to improve our milling processes that we can accept the grain that comes in, because, that's one thing that you always have that variability and we don't always have control of that. But we do try to make sure that whatever we mill and make is going to be the absolute best of what can be made.
So I'm assuming you're a big player in the overall oat crop in Ireland in terms of what you purchase.
Yes and no. I guess we would be kind of the largest, one of the largest mills in Ireland, absolutely, for consumer food. But much of the oat crop that gets put in the ground gets taken into animal feed. So I think on last estimate, we probably take only, on the conventional side, probably only 10% of the oats that are grown in Ireland, and much of the remainder goes into animal feed or retained by farmers for their own stock.
Yeah. Okay. Still 10% of the national crop, effectively from one brand, is a very significant, makes you a very significant player. What's an ideal oats season? Do you know? Like is it like I should know more about growing oats, but I don't. Like what are we talking about? Like we're spring sowing, autumn harvesting, is it?
So we have two. So you can plant winter and spring oats.
Okay. So there's an overwintering variety.
There is a wintering variety. So you have opportunity to both. Kind of ideal conditions are free of frost, because frost can be very detrimental to it. Planting conditions have to allow quite a dry soil. And then you want to maintain kind of reasonable, regular water, rain throughout. Okay. So a long period of drought will have a very detrimental effect through the growing season, the growing pattern. But equally, too much rain, if it's flooding fields, has an equally detrimental impact.
Okay.
And then kind of beyond that, coming into the summertime, the ripening is incredibly important in terms of bringing on the fullness of the grain. And that requires sunshine.
Yeah.
So if we have kind of a couple of weeks of sunshine, it can do really, really positive things for the grain, because it means it comes on fuller, it becomes a lot easier to harvest, and that gives us a better quality product as well. I can recall back to 2022 when, growing conditions could not have been more ideal for anyone in tillage in that year. It was perfect planting conditions, it was frost-free throughout, and then come the summertime we had heat temperature that summer of 29 to 31.
So even that was a kind of drought as well, though, right? Am I thinking about the right year?
It wasn't dry. It was only dry towards the latter part of it. Okay. So that was when we were kind of seasoning it up. So
that suits it actually.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming. So your spring crop is being sown when, around March, April?
It normally around March or April.
Okay, so I'm assuming the last number of weeks have been very challenging in that case, if we've had non-stop rain since.
Yeah, no, I think certainly feedback from our growers again has been that it is challenging at present. So they're looking for windows of opportunity where that's where you're trying to get them. It's not an easy thing. It's very it's a difficult season this year again for growers, and we would be anticipating that it could be another one like the previous year, 2023. 2023, by all accounts, is one of the worst years that you could have had between planting season and harvest.
Okay. And this year could be similar.
We're hopeful it won't be, but the planting season being as late as it is does have an effect.
Yeah. And so there's a window. When is the window closed, like for sowing?
For lots of growers, again, it very much depends on soil and orientation and environment that you're growing in, but kind of the 1st of May is almost the cutoff a lot of them would have in their own minds as to when they would say there's no point in putting seed in the ground after that point.
Okay, so a dry spell, a couple of weeks would make all the difference at that time of the year, And so, I mean, you're obviously a company that's very focused on sustainability, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But what kind of downstream or influence can you have on your growers around regenerative agriculture and practices? Obviously, your organic growers are well ahead of the curve on that already. But what kind of changes do you want to see in the production of oats to sort of enhance that story, I suppose? Yeah,
look, there's a couple of things that we try to do on our own side. And look, we have, we've proactively looked at kind of what applications are being put onto the oats for any of our own suppliers. And we've kind of contracted to say that we don't accept oats with certain applications. And that's just our own standards that we're keeping. I guess beyond that, we are kind of going through an exercise, and we try to run seminars on a periodic basis to try and inform best practice. So we would have run, for example, in the organic sector, we would have run a seminar last December with, grower participation from across the country, and brought on speakers to try and share out best practice, share out kind of how, they can learn from each other and what things can be done to improve, for the growers, their yield, their performance, their resilience. All of those things are important to them. But again, if they're getting the best crop they can get, then we are getting the best crop we can get. And then kind of engaging with the agronomists on our own side to try and, understand what factors can be given to, or what sort of influences you can give to the growers to make sure that all of those regenerative practices are being brought in.
Yeah,
I would hazard that lots of our growers, lots of Irish agriculture are already in that frame of mind already. Mm-hmm. There's no grower anywhere who's wasting at this point. Everyone is incredibly diligent in how they prepare and plan their production. So, there's nothing that's been wasted on a farm at this point.
Yeah. And like that resilience, I suppose, that can come from healthier soils and regeneratively grown crops, all the more important in a kind of climate change context, presumably where the weather is more unpredictable and all the things we're seeing in the last while.
Absolutely.
A quick one. Now, I know you get asked on almost every podcast these days to hit that follow or subscribe button, but they never really tell you why that's important. Simply put, if you hit the follow button, it helps us to grow the show, get more great guests, and to reach more people just like you. So it's a small gesture from you that means a huge amount to us. Thanks. Now back to the episode. So let's sort of speak about, because again, some of the things I was reading about the business bringing in more renewable sources of power and so on, like using the river that's beside the plant and so on for generating power, using wind turbines and all that kind of thing. It feels like you were well ahead of the curve there. That it's not sort of something you're kind of just coming to more recently.
Yeah, look, I guess this is foresight beyond my own time in the business. But again, credit to John Flahavan and his predecessors. They've been looking at this, trying to maximize the opportunity from the business for decades. Going back to, the turbine being one example. It's a mill. Going back as long as it was once upon a time powered by a traditional water wheel. It was, and that wheel stream is still in place now, but that would have been converted in around the 1920s to a turbine. So even at that stage, the fact that we were moving away from that mechanized water-powered mill, we were moving into the electrical age at that point and using the existing infrastructure to drive that performance. So that's going on nearly 100 years now. We've been going through that phase of repurposing and re-engaging to try and make it as efficient as we can. Beyond that, then part of our cyclical process in the mill, we have a biomass boiler. That's one of our strands where we have regenerative and renewable energy brought onto the site. But again, that's going back to kind of, it must be there, I'm going to say 60 years at this point that we've had that system in place. And just to explain a little bit about that, oats have a shell on them, the husk.
The husk, yeah. And
so that removal is a byproduct. And that can be used for animal feed, and it's got a nutritional value to it. But you're not going to want to see it in your porridge.
Yeah.
So we remove it. And one of the streams we use it for is we use it as a fuel source for the mill.
Okay.
So that's kind of the story there. So it's taking a full cycle of, this is a byproduct that comes from our milling process, part of the process, and then we reintroduce it back into our mill in a heat source.
As a heat source.
And
that's going back a long time. Like that's
going back a long time. Yeah.
A recent innovation. I think 1985 I read that, which is incredible. I mean, that would have been, like the idea of a circular economy is very, very kind of current, I guess. But that's like, 40 years ago?
Yeah. So it's been there a long time at this point. But again, it's part of that. It helps us be a bit more efficient with it. And the heat piece is, milling does require that element of heat for stabilization and for cooking. It does take that. And so this is just a way that we can make use of our own products as best we can.
And what else is happening? So you've got the turbine, you've got the water usage to generate power, you've got the oat husk boiler. What sort of other things are happening in the business to make it more energy efficient and more sustainable? Yeah, so
the wind turbine being one of them. That's one that was in there for 12 years now, I think, or 2015. Yeah, but 9 years at this point. So that's been a big aspect to our business in terms of creating that energy efficiency piece. And while it's not going to generate all of our electrical needs, it's adding a huge amount. And look, we're milling 7 days a week, and we're milling often around the clock. We're using that energy throughout. And so to be able to generate it for ourselves whenever the wind is blowing is a huge advantage to the company. I guess beyond that, then we have engaged with solar. So, as with lots of people have at this point, trying to reduce our energy costs.
Yeah.
Taking on solar has been a big advantage to us as well. So we've got 2 arrays on the site, one of which was just installed last year. But again, that's generating a sizable amount of our energy needs that we need.
Yeah. So, Johnny, I'm interested in sort of shifting gears a little bit into the kind of health side of things, right? So it feels like obviously these things are cyclical in terms of trends and things that around what's perceived as healthy is not. Like we talked about ultra processed food already, and how this feels like almost the opposite of that. You know, like it's just certainly the core kind of porridge product. It's such a natural product, minimally processed. What's your sense of where you're sitting within the sort of current health trends? Because it's like I've seen in the last, I suppose, 10 years the Flahavans brand positioning itself as sort of the alternative to the highly processed cereals in the morning and so on. But like that shifts all the time. You know, what's perceived as healthy or not changes, and obviously at the moment we've got like very extreme diets and people trying different things to lose weight and get healthy and so on. Like, what's your sense of where it's at the moment, and where that creates opportunities or challenges, I guess?
Look, it's probably a mixture of both. To talk about the opportunities and the challenges, I mean, on the opportunity side, oats have always been, I guess, always recognized as being a core healthy product. I mean, we are proud of the fact that our milling process, and the milling process of oats is very, I'm going to call it low touch. Like, you aren't adding anything. The only addition that we make to our oats throughout the whole process is injecting pure steam. That's it. There's no other additions. There's no other washing. There's no other chemicals. There's never been chemicals applied to it. So it's just
the steam is to do what? Like what is that achieving?
So the steam application is to allow it to be rolled.
Okay.
So you need to cook it, apply steam so that you can soften the oat. So when it goes through a kind of a rolling system, in effect, it's just to
turn it into a flake.
Turn into a
rolling
flake.
system.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the only kind of addition, so to speak, of what goes into our product. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, it's mechanical. It's creating a clarified process. It's creating a pure process. But that's something that we feel is not going to change. I guess part of the longevity of the business is that it's always been known and accepted that oats are a really important part of your diet.
Yeah.
And they have been for generations.
Yeah.
As we've been there for generations. It's not, that hasn't changed in our eyes. I guess we've been fortunate that some of the recent kind of diets and lifestyle things that have been identified have called out oats again and again and again for all of the benefits that they bring to it. Like, low GI was something that was, very strongly encouraged less than 10 years ago. Oats had always been a cornerstone of that.
Yeah.
You look at any diets today and they look at kind of slow release energy. They look at kind of increasing your beta glucan, reducing your cholesterol. All of them will focus on oats as being one of the things that will help you in that lifestyle.
Yeah. Have you, I think if I'm right in saying there is a mention of cholesterol on the packaging, the porridge, maybe only the organic one, is it? But it does mention that as can you speak a little bit about that? Like, I know, like, neither of us are medical doctors, but like, what does porridge do for, or what do oats do for cholesterol?
So I guess oats are high in a component called beta glucan.
Okay.
And beta glucan is known to have a factor on reducing your cholesterol.
Yeah. That's
kind of the tie in there. So all of the oats that we have will have an effector to improve your cholesterol levels.
Yeah.
Albeit, again, conditional. Again, not a medical expert on this, not a nutritionist, but would recognize that as a healthy diet, it'll always be a benefit. Yeah.
So it binds, I think, to it, isn't it, in the gut, and helps kind of flush it out your system effectively. And do you know, does the organic oat do that more effectively than a conventional oat?
No, in terms of nutritional profiles, they're very equivalent.
Okay.
Yeah, very equivalent. The oats broadly are grown in similar climes, similar applications. There's not much in the difference that would have a nutritional impact.
Yeah. Okay. So, what about the different products, I suppose, then, that we've seen starting, over the last, maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 years in particular, but like the high 8 muesli and so on, like, was it like responding to sort of threats to the sort of core porridge product, maybe, or was it more about just diversifying and creating additional income streams? What drives that innovation?
Well, I guess it's trying to grow the business, trying to understand where there might be opportunity to take people into the business who wouldn't otherwise have known Flahavans. I guess it's great that we have a hero product in the porridge, but not everyone eats porridge. Not everyone eats a hot breakfast. Some people want it ready to eat. Some people want, a snack on the go. Some people, they might not have it at home. They might want it in an office space or in another classroom space or whatever the case may be. Yeah. So part of that diversification is trying just to, I guess, get more recognition for the brand and get more opportunities for people to take the brand, to eat our product.
Can you remember what was you said earlier on there was 3 SKUs. Can you remember what the 4th one was? Like, what was the first time something new came in? Do you know what I mean?
The next new product after those 3 was a drum format. So that was the next one along. It was a similar type of product. The quick oats, slightly different in terms of its milling process, but a quicker cooking process. So it was moving in their first foray was into the more convenient space to try and create a, one that be more, for someone who wouldn't be familiar with porridge and maybe wanted to try it, a way for them to get into it and understand the convenience of it. Because as much as some people would have an impression that oats are a complicated, kind of arduous task in the morning to prepare for, but actually, 90 seconds it's as quick as you turn on an espresso machine. You'll have a bowl of porridge out of your microwave. That's the equivalent. That's how convenient it is.
Yeah, and even putting it on the hob or whatever, it's relatively quick. I'm curious, actually, a question in my own mind. Is there benefit in soaking them overnight before cooking them in the morning or not? Or why would you do that?
There's a few people. Everyone has their own way of cooking, making the porridge. Everyone have their own way of doing it. The soaking overnight, I know a number of people, anecdotally in our own environment in the office, they soak overnight and they see that it makes a creamier porridge. It takes the water in and it cooks quicker in the morning. It will cook quicker if you're putting on the hob, for example. And soaking overnight does that. And there would be people would feedback that it makes a creamier porridge by doing that.
And the overnight, and you can eat them raw as well at that point. Like, I guess overnight oats are kind of a bit of a hipster.
Absolutely. Overnight oats another one there.
And that contrast, I suppose, between you referenced earlier on, like the housewife back in the early 1900s would have had to cook it for hours on end, compared with like throw it in the microwave for 10 seconds or whatever it is. Like, it's some transition. Like,
absolutely. It's moving with the technology and what machinery was available at the time. We've got very advanced machinery on the site at this point that can make any factor and form of product that we need. And part of that is that convenience piece, and that is important.
Do you need to have like nutritionists and health experts in the business to sort of be scanning the horizon for opportunities and maybe challenges down the road to the product?
We've got a good team across kind of a quality and innovation departments that will be looking constantly across the market and across an international market. They're looking all over the world to see, is there a new hot trend in oats? Is there something that we could be doing, exploring, tasting, bringing to an Irish consumer or indeed to one of our export customers to say, these are the new innovations in porridge, new innovation in oats. We'd love to share with you our proposals and how we'd bring that to the table. Like that's ongoing. Like, we are very much committed to innovation in the business to try and identify and, capture these trends and if at all, pioneer them.
So on which point, I guess, a nice segue into discussion around oat milk, because like a lot of people, I suppose I kind of more recently stopped drinking dairy. I think for me, largely it was, as it is for a lot of people, about trying to minimize my own kind of carbon footprint and so on. Albeit the son-in-law of a dairy farmer, so not a particularly popular sort of an approach at home. But a couple of years ago started, like, obviously Alpro and others had oat milks going back a long time, but a couple of years ago started seeing organic Flahavans oat milk on the shelves in supermarkets, and to me that was just because it's plant-based, because I know it's organic oats grown in Ireland. To me, that's an amazing alternative. Like, can you talk a little bit about was behind that, and what the sort of scale of the opportunity is there for Flahavans in that space?
Yeah, look, I'll talk to that, of course. So I guess to maybe think about kind of when we brought that product to market, it was at a point when there was quite an upward trajectory on all non-dairy drinks.
Yeah,
those milk alternatives. And look, we saw there was opportunity for ourselves. Again, we've always wanted to identify as being kind of to the forefront of oat and oat development, and with a brand that's so iconic and well known in Ireland, it's a good opportunity for us to demonstrate that Irish oats are in this Irish brand's product. And so for us, it was just kind of a natural segue to try and explore how we would bring that to the market. I guess to the market overall, I think there's probably a recognition, and look, there's different studies that will talk to this in more detail, but oat drink is one of the least carbon impact of all of those alternative drink types, be it almonds or soya, but oats have always been identified as one that's a lower carbon impact. And that's something, again, parts of that sustainability piece we're able to identify with.
And not only is it lower carbon footprint, it's also local, because if you're like soya milk, it's always imported. It's probably South America, very high water intake crop and so on.
And I guess then to your question on kind of where do we see the market in that, we're quite unique in that kind of we call it top 5 in the category, in that the organic is one of our strong performers across that. The market is very much established by the Oatleys and the Alpros. And they've got huge teams and huge resource behind that to try and promote those two products.
Oatly, is Oatly a UK brand?
Swedish.
Because you do see them advertising a lot in Ireland. Presumably they're making a big play here as well.
Absolutely. So they're making a big play internationally. So we're not riding on their coattails, but we're trying to establish our own niche in the Irish market and kind of maintain that if there's a product with oats in it, that we want to be the experts in it.
Can I ask you a kind of very specific question? Why is Oatly and Alpro in the fridge section in my supermarket and Flahavans isn't? It's in it's like top shelf, ambient, not chilled. Why is that? It doesn't need to be chilled.
Doesn't need to be.
But why? Because it's where you expect to see your milk, I suppose. Milk in inverted commas, and I'm sure that'll annoy a lot of people even calling it milk. But why would that be the case? Do you know?
It's just for placement. It's store placement. So it's something that they would have identified as where they want to position their product.
Okay.
Commonly, I'm not aware of any of the oat drinks that need to be in a chilled space. Much of them will be ambient and UHT, and only requiring chilling after you've opened them, as is the case with our own product.
What's the process for making oat milk? Like what do you do? Because I know, like, if you take, like we were talking earlier on about the overnight oats, effectively you've sort of an oat milk, but not really. What's the difference between that and the product that you get in the cartons then?
So I guess the treatments are a little bit are quite different. So in the first instance, it's not a wild kind of idea as how to put it together, but effectively you're taking it down to a very, very fine powder. You're homogenizing it and you're processing it through kind of a couple of stages of extracting the kind of the oat flavor and the oat profile from that fine powder. It's effectively an oat flour. And then extracting the solids and then maintaining the liquids behind, which maintain kind of the flavor profile, the texture and all the rest. And then it's a process which is similar to any of the kind of ambient drinks. It's a UHT process beyond that to try and stabilize it. Package it.
Wow. So it's a lot more complicated than I thought, basically. So, Johnny, you mentioned you've got siblings involved in the business as well. I'm really interested in hearing about that dynamic, because I love my sisters and my siblings, but I definitely don't want to be in business with them. How does that all pan out, and what's the sort of structure there about who's the top dog and all that?
Yeah, look, I guess John Flahavan is still, he's there part of the day-to-day running of the organisation. But there's 3, myself, a brother and sister, who have kind of the lead responsibilities in the organisation.
Okay.
So each covering our own departments, but kind of collective responsibility for the ongoing support of the business.
Yeah.
I guess it's an interesting challenge when you're working with family, but we've got a pretty close relationship, and we do have a fairly successful working relationship beyond that. So it seems to work. It doesn't need to be too contentious, but
how do those dynamics from being a teenager though, like the stuff that used to annoy you about your brother when you were like 12, do you find yourself in meetings going, oh God, there he goes again with that trait that I used to hate as a 12-year-old?
No, not especially. I think you kind of work those things out as a teenager, and so you get to your professional life and you're like, okay, we've got jobs to do here. We're all working to the same team and singing from the same hymn sheet and pulling in the same direction.
There's a little bit of a unique challenge then there as well with your father, like still being involved, which I'm sure is an amazing resource to tap into for sure. But also, it's like I suppose somebody inheriting a farm and then your dad is still there, sort of saying, "I'm not sure if I'd plough that field." How does that sort of pan out?
He's pretty giving with his delegation, in that he's kind of letting us to do the day-to-day business.
Yeah.
But he absolutely has an input. Yeah. And a valued input in that he's, you sit down to dinner of an evening and he'll be asking about, okay, have you thought about how we could reutilize this product here? And is there a customer maybe that would like to take in this format? Or, there's different things that he'd be in his mind thinking throughout the day, be it in a sustainability piece or be it in a commercial piece or be it in a, structural piece. He's always got an input. Yeah. Like he's been part of parcel. He's lived and breathed the business for so long. Yeah. He knows it inside out. And, it'd be remiss of anyone to ignore him when he comes to the table and says, these are things that I think I would like you to do. Yeah.
He has the pedigree and the experience and track record, I suppose, most importantly. You're not going to ignore him if he says, I think you're wrong, or I think you should try doing it better, or whatever.
But equally, he does give freedom to myself, brother and sister, to run the business as best we can. Yeah. But yeah, he's definitely I'm not going to say in the background, but he's a part of it, definitely still, and a very important part of it.
Is it harder to switch off as a family when you mentioned at the dinner table them saying, have you thought about reutilizing this product line or whatever? Like how do you switch off?
You kind of don't. I mean, you're always connected to it. I wake up, as an example, like last night I was called to the factory at 2 a.m. to look at a fire alarm. There was something triggered. There was things happening. You're always on. Yeah. You're always on in terms of where you're interacting with it. Yeah. My wife is very accepting of that. That's that situation. That's the vocation. Yeah. But yeah, you're always on, and you're always kind of thinking about how to make it better and how you better engage with your consumer and how you better engage with your customer and how you explore export markets and domestic markets. It's always something that you want to try and play on. Yeah. So while we often have it as a topic of conversation at the dinner table, we try to talk about other things at the same time as well. Yeah,
to have a bit of balance. I have to ask as well, I mean, like, do you like porridge? Do you eat porridge in the morning or do you like have Cocoa Pops or poached egg?
I'm definitely ready to eat. So my current is high 8 topped with granolas.
Okay, very good. And you've got plenty of product choices to choose from there. That's good to hear. And did you go through periods of your life where you were like, as a teenager, going like, I hate this stuff, like porridge. Don't give me another bowl of porridge, Mum.
There's probably been periods where you would rebel a little bit from it, but you've always come back to it. Yeah. Like I remember when I moved to the UK and kind of, early morning starts going into the office and, you'd be hungry by 11 or you'd be snacking, you'd be taking cups of coffee to get your sugar levels up and get your caffeine levels up. And I kind of rediscovered in my early 20s again how beneficial porridge can be for your day. It's one of those things that, you forget about until you get back into the activity of having it again, that you realize just how beneficial it can be. Yeah.
And just getting you through the morning. I think you're right. Like there is something about that sort of being able to get through to lunchtime without feeling you need a snack or whatever.
Yeah,
absolutely. What else excites you about the kind of product development side of things? Like in terms of the current range, you said 600 SKUs, which is incredible. Like I can only think of 10 or 15, but anyway.
No, we're at 60, more than 60.
Sorry, 60 you said, not 600. Yeah. That makes more sense. But even still, like what you know, as I said, I can only probably think of 15. What excites you within the range, and what's exciting you about what's down the tracks?
So I guess down the tracks, there's a couple of things that are really quite exciting in my mind. And that's kind of around our snacking piece. Like we've got, you know, on the site in Kilmacthomas, where we manufacture kind of almost all of our products there.
Yeah.
One of them is a bakery, and the bakery has real potential to drive that market, and there's huge growth in that space that we can try and get some foothold in. Look, we've got a great product in the flapjack, but what I'm really excited about is some of the innovation coming from that space. You know, there's different thoughts around how we're going to develop out the existing range, but equally add to it so that we get more people, more occasions for our product.
Yeah.
You know, it was great to see during the Six Nations, there was a couple of shots that they showed the dressing rooms of the Irish team, and there was bananas, Barry's tea, and Flavin's flapjacks on the table.
Wow.
So it's kind of...
You can't buy that kind of...
You can't buy that kind of press.
Or did you buy that?
No, that wasn't bought.
Wow.
No, that was just incidental.
That's amazing.
It was great to see that, you know, in those sorts of occasions, we're looking at kind of, you know, trying to identify where the product can be best maintained and kind of give people occasion for. So if it's a sporting occasion or a snacking occasion or a coffee occasion, like have products that match all of those. You know, there's been great success with some brands in Ireland, and say the Fulfill bars, those protein bars have done really successful. But you know, if we were to explore some of those, there's great ideas about how you can identify an oat-based protein bar and have that as a snack that appears in a forecourt or appears in a supermarket front of house. That's the sort of thing we really think is going to be
and I think a lot of the sort of nutrition advice is the importance of bringing protein into when you're eating carbohydrates as well. So that ties in with that. And like, again, I mean, I like to think I've a fairly healthy diet. Love I've a terrible sweet tooth. Love like something sweet, particularly with coffee or tea or whatever. But again, it does strike me that like you've stayed on the right side with the flapjacks of minimal numbering of ingredients. Like if you compare it to an equivalent product, there's I don't know how many, 5 or 6 ingredients in your flapjacks. Like it feels like something you'd make at home rather than, you know, like a highly processed sort of sugary snack.
Oh yeah. Like I'm not going to claim it's a low sugar snack, but we do try to think that it's a comparatively healthy snack.
Yeah.
And like I say, it's ingredients that you'll recognize. You know, when you're talking about that flapjack, our original flapjack has got kind of 4 core ingredients.
Yeah.
And the biggest one is oats. So you're getting a huge dose of your oat intake as part of it. And it's a relatively simple recipe. You know, it could be replicated perhaps, but just the process and technique and the oats that we use in it are going to be what's proprietary to us. It's what we have our specialty in. Yeah.
And they're manufactured in Waterford as well.
Yeah. All of them are. Yeah.
That's amazing. And speaking of Waterford, I mean, like as a Waterford business ourselves, like I think Waterford people are very proud of the fact that Flahavans is here and in Kilmac, and like how important is that to the brand as part of your heritage?
Oh, it's totally core. I mean, we are proud of our positioning there. You know, we're in that same location since inception. Like we're positioned by the River Mahon, and that's always where we've been. And we're very proud of the fact that we've got our footprint there. We've got huge support from the community, and not Waterford, but even specifically in Kilmac. We've got, you know, operators that have been working with us for many years, and then prior to that would be their fathers and grandfathers. We've got huge legacy of kind of that continuity of expertise, that continuity of support, and we've been shown really significant goodwill from the community.
Yeah. And what kind of an employer, scale wise, would you be in Kilmac? Like,
so we're about 100 staff, over 100 at this point.
Yeah. So it's very significant employer in a like a place the size of Kilmac.
Yeah.
And it strikes me like that generational employment. It feels a lot like Guinness, you know, that sort of sense of a product that's based around plants and tillage that's been employing people for hundreds of years in a specific location. You know, that's kind of a cool aspect to it as well.
Yeah. No, it like I say, it's very important to us, and I can't stress enough the fact that we've got such support from the team that we have there with us today. It's been, it has been a factor of our success that we've had that longevity and we've had that continuity and expertise carried through.
And more visible now on the Greenway. Like one of the things that struck me actually, like I had been to the factory before, but when you go on the Greenway, like, it feels like it's a more visible part of the Waterford sort of the Waterford tourism experience as well.
Absolutely, no, it is. And look, I think lots of people kind of make an assumption that Flahavans is some brand that's made off in a factory far from where they're consuming it from, but it is. It's right in the heart of Waterford. It's, for the most part, our conventional growers are within throwing distance of the factory. It's not that far that we take them from. So if you're buying your oats in Ireland and you're taking our product, it hasn't got very many road miles on it. Like it's a local product. And it's very visible. Like the fact that we're there right underneath the Greenway, it just shows people that when they talk to Flahavans and they talk to the brand and they talk to the product, they know where it's coming from. There's nothing hidden from it. Yeah.
I'm curious about the advertising and marketing, Johnny, which like, as I said, I think a lot of people my age, certainly, I think I'm older than you, but anyway, I won't ask you to clarify that. Will remember the those sort of iconic ads, the start your day the Flahavans way kind of thing. The jogging father and son, as it were, and somebody said to me an early role for Andrew Scott. Is that true?
Yeah. I think the child in that ad
is Andrew Scott. That's mad.
Yeah.
So an Oscar connection, literally, with your advertising.
I think he was. I think once upon a time he was appearing on the Late Late Show, and John Flahavan was in the audience. So Dad was in the audience and presented Andrew Scott with the jersey he wore from that same advert.
That's brilliant. I hope it was washed. But yes, that's amazing. And it does strike me that the advertising has gone a bit quirkier over the last while. Like what's the sort of overall direction of your marketing, and is it different in different markets, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, no, it is. It's absolutely different in different markets because your consumer is different. Yeah. So in the UK, as an example, it's organic is a big strand of our UK business, and so you're trying to target that. And for an organic customer, things that are important to them beyond the taste and beyond the quality piece is they want to know that it's sustainable. They want to know that it's there's a supply chain that they can recognize and understand, and they want to know the heritage of their product. That's important to them. For the consumer in Ireland, lots of people would already recognize the brand. And that have a trust in the quality and that have a trust in the reputation of what we do. And so it's just about making it more aware. It's making it more visible to them. So some of the more quirky kind of ads that have been put out to the market of recent years have just been trying to re-engage customers at all different demographics, because we've got consumers who, we need to recruit in the younger cohort, and we've got consumers in an older cohort that we want to just acknowledge and recognize and, make sure that we're front of mind when they're out doing their weekly shop, and they're picking up Flahavans as the brand that they want in their basket and the one that they recognize and they trust in.
Yeah. I did want to just mention Mary Flavin as well, because like I remember when we were developing our first book, Grow, Cook, Eat, we got a recipe from Mary for, I think it was porridge bread. I'm not 100% sure, but like I do remember, she had that sort of ability, I think, to reach consumers with a sort of, here's what you can do with the core product and make it into a recipe. So like add a tub of porridge, add a tub of yogurt, make it into porridge bread, and so on. Like she had that ability, which is sort of the forerunner of some of the innovation, I think, that came later. Would that be fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. She was a cornerstone of the business. She was incredibly involved in every aspect of it.
Had a cookbook too, right?
Yeah. She had 3 different recipe books she developed as part of that in recent years. But yeah, she very much was a driver of the innovation and kind of exploring what the product could do. She would be in the kitchen, she'd be trialing flapjack recipes, and she'd be trialing different recipes that could be taken in and explored and teased out. And like the porridge bread recipe is our, because we track this on our website, it's the most referenced recipe of the Flahavans website is the porridge bread.
Wow.
And it's just recognizing those sorts of ways you can use the product beyond your traditional bowl of porridge, beyond your maybe not so traditional overnight oats, but going beyond that into pancakes or into breads or into, other baking products, or even into an oats otto.
Yeah.
Making it into a savory dish, which is, an unusual way for people to take your oats in.
Yeah. Amazing. And for, I think, like, we've a person in our house at home who can't eat wheat, so like the porridge bread is a very, very important part of the arsenal there. Johnny, I suppose just to finish this out, like, as you sit there, I mean, you're in the role how long? I guess 3-4 years.
Yeah, about 3 years now.
Yeah. Like, what if you scan the horizon, the 10 years from now, say, what's your sense of what are the big opportunities for the brand and the growth ambitions, and what are the challenges, the big challenges that you're facing?
Look, the big growth, we want to make sure that the Irish consumer stays with the brand. That's a really important part of what we do. And beyond that, there's great opportunity in exports. We've got a unique position in that we're kind of a heritage brand that can demonstrate its longevity and can demonstrate its expertise in oats. And that carries with it a lot of credibility when you go to export markets. So we see that the export has an opportunity for us there. And then I guess beyond that, we've got a huge depth of innovation that we're planning on in the next number of years. And that includes ranges of bars and additions to our current lineup. But, in 10 years' time, we'll still be very much an oat-based producer. Just we'd like to be that bit bigger and that bit more successful.
Yeah. And what about challenges then? Like, would climate change be up there as a potential? When you're looking at your risks as a business, like how big, how close to the top of the list of risks would that be?
It's up there, very close to the top. It's something we do have to contend with. It's hard to gauge exactly how it's going to pan out over the next number of years, but certainly, it seems to be very much, if bad weather, or we call it bad weather, but poor weather for oat growing is repeated year on year on year, that just means that growers are not going to be motivated to be in that space at all. And that for us is a factor that we'll have to contend with then.
Are you losing growers at the moment or gaining growers, do you think? What's your sense of it?
We're gaining growers in organic, and I'd hazard that some of our conventional growers are maybe thinking again about how they participate in the sector.
Okay.
It's hard to take a full read of it, but that would be my impression at present.
Yeah. Paul Brophy, when we had him on the podcast, spoke about the competition for land from, like dairy farming on one side and solar farms on the other. Like, are you seeing anything like that coming into the tillage
absolutely
side?
That's absolutely front of mind. Taking land from tillage, if it's in rented or if it's currently in tillage, there's huge demand from the dairy sector for land, and it's limited supply. You're not making more of it. You can't just manufacture land. It's there or it's not.
Yeah.
And so when you redeploy it and you reuse it, or you're using it for dairy as opposed to tillage, that definitely has a factor. And I guess the knock-on consequence of that is once you bring it into dairy, all of those animals have to eat, and they're eating grains, which again is eating into the available tillage for an oat miller.
Yeah, God, that really gives a sense of how circular that problem is, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And ironically, I suppose, if you can build a market for plant-based milks, like oat milk, like that can be part of the solution there as well. And Johnny, we have a sort of closing tradition on the podcast as well, then, to ask you, why does food matter to Johnny Flahavan?
Why does food matter? Look, without having too much of a quote on it, it's inherent to everything a person does. Beyond your sleep, food is going to be your next biggest component. It's incredibly important for fueling. It's incredibly important for well-being. It's incredibly important for, maintaining every aspect of your life. Without good fueling, then lots of other things are going to fall behind.
Yeah, good answer. You also happened to mention on the way up the stairs here that next generation of Flahavans beyond you. You said you're the 8th, right? No,
I'm
7th.
Seventh generation.
So the 8th generation sounds like it's underway. You've got a little person in your life. Is he interested in?
He's at so I've got a 2-year-old at home, and yeah, we live immediately adjacent to the factory. So
Okay.
his life is looking out the window at the factory, and
That's gas.
he's fascinated by the tractors that come at harvest time, and fascinated by the machines, and just wants to be part of it at this stage. That
Yeah.
might change in years to go, but
Yeah.
as a 2-year-old, he's incredibly interested in everything happening over there.
That's mad. That's great. And great to hear that future generations, it sounds like, are in good hands. Johnny, thanks a million. Like I just feel like as a Waterford person who's interested in good food, I have so much respect for what Flavins, do and continue to do for us as a county, and promoting something that's really healthy. And I just love seeing such a successful Irish brand doing its stuff and continuing to innovate and so on. So hats off to you all and continued success. And thanks a million for coming on the podcast.
Great. Thanks very much, Mick.
That's it for this episode of Food Matters, but we would love you to get more connected to the GIY universe. So we believe that our food system is having a catastrophic impact on people's health and the health of our planet, and we think a movement of people growing some of their own food is the way to fix it. You can stay connected to GIY by signing up to our free newsletter and check out our full range of events, campaigns, resources and courses at giy.ie. Check out the show notes for more information. Thanks for listening, and see you soon.